In the ancient world, nestled in the heart of the Mediterranean, lay the island of Crete, a land of stunning beauty, yet a place notorious for its moral decay. It was here, amidst the bustling harbors and chaotic streets, that one of the early church's most challenging missions would unfold. This is the story of Titus, a man entrusted by the Apostle Paul to build a beacon of light in a world shrouded in darkness. As dawn breaks over the sea, imagine Titus, a trusted companion of Paul, arriving on this complex island. The streets of Crete were a maze of human-experienced merchants haggling, sailors shouting, and a restless energy in the air. The culture was known for its indulgence, its dishonesty, and its rebellious spirit. It was into this very environment that the seeds of the gospel had been planted, but they were struggling to grow in rocky soil. In the quiet of a humble room, away from the noise of the city, Titus unrolls a precious letter. The parchment is weathered from travel, but the words written upon it carry the weight of apostolic authority and deep personal care. It's a letter from his mentor, Paul. As Titus's eyes scan the text, we can almost hear Paul's voice, writing from afar. Paul, a servant of God and an apostle of Jesus Christ, for the sake of the faith of God's elect and their knowledge of the truth, which accords with godliness. This wasn't just a casual greeting. It was a declaration of purpose. Paul's entire identity was tied to serving God and nurturing the faith of believers. He was writing to Titus, his true child, in a common faith, not just as a leader, but as a spiritual father. The letter laid out the mission with stark clarity. Paul had left Titus in Crete to put in order what was left unfinished. The young churches on the island were in disarray. We see glimpses of the chaos. Small groups of believers meeting in homes, their faces etched with confusion. False teachers were preying on their vulnerability, twisting the truth for personal gain and causing entire households to stray from the faith. The community was fractured, and the witness of the church was at risk. The first step, Paul instructed, was to establish sound leadership. He gave Titus a clear blueprint for appointing elders, the spiritual guardians of the church. These were not to be men seeking power or prestige. They had to be blameless, faithful husbands, and fathers whose children were believers. They needed to be hospitable, lovers of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. Above all, they must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it had been taught, so they could encourage others with sound doctrine and refute those who opposed it. The contrast with the unqualified was sharp. Paul warned against appointing men who were arrogant, quick-tempered, given to drunkenness, violent, or greedy for dishonest gain. These traits, so common in the surrounding culture, were poison to the body of Christ. Leadership wasn't about a title. It was about character. It was about reflecting the heart of God to a world that desperately needed to see him. But why was this so critical? Because a dangerous threat was already inside the church. Paul described them as rebellious people, full of meaningless talk and deception, especially those from a Jewish background who insisted on circumcision and legalistic rules. These false teachers were ruining entire households, teaching things they shouldn't for the sake of dishonest gain. They were like wolves in sheep's clothing, exploiting the flock for their own selfish purposes. Paul even quoted one of Crete's own prophets who said, "Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons." While a harsh stereotype, Paul affirmed his testimony was true, which is why Titus had to rebuke them sharply. The goal wasn't to condemn, but to restore them to a sound faith, free from Jewish myths and the man-made commands that turned people away from the truth. The spiritual health of the entire community was at stake. Here, Paul reveals a profound spiritual principle. He writes, "To the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are corrupted and do not believe, nothing is pure. In fact, both their minds and consciences are corrupted." Purity isn't about external rules or rituals. It's an internal state of the heart. A heart devoted to God sees the world through a lens of grace and truth. But a heart corrupted by unbelief and sin taints everything it touches. It can take the most beautiful truths and twist them into something ugly and self-serving. This leads to the pinnacle of Paul's warning: the devastating reality of hypocrisy. They claim to know God, but by their actions, they deny him. This is one of the most sobering statements in the New Testament. These false teachers spoke the language of faith, They may have looked religious, sounded pious, and participated in all the right activities, but their lies, their greed, their divisiveness, their love of self were a constant denial of the God they claimed to serve. They were, in Paul's words, detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good. Their actions screamed louder than their words. As Titus finishes the letter, the weight of the task is immense, but he's not overwhelmed. Instead, his face is filled with a new resolve. Paul's words were not just a command. They were an empowerment. They were a reminder that he was not alone. The truth of the gospel was his sword, and the grace of God was his shield. He steps out from the quiet room back into the noisy, complicated streets of Crete. But this time, he walks with a renewed sense of purpose. He is a shepherd ready to protect his flock, a builder ready to restore the foundations, a servant of God on a mission. The sun breaks through the clouds, a divine promise of guidance and hope for the difficult road ahead. Now that we have experienced this story, let's take a moment to reflect. The challenges Titus faced in Crete: cultural corruption, false teaching, hypocrisy are not so different from the challenges we face today. The call to live a life where our actions align with our faith is timeless. Paul's letter to Titus is a powerful reminder that what we believe must transform how we live, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of a watching world. The integrity of our lives is the most powerful sermon we will ever preach. In what area of your life is God inviting you to let your actions more truthfully reflect your faith?